Commanders Office, your favorite Commanders YouTube show. Let's have a little bit of a conversation about this Terry McLaurin contract, shall we? If this is your first time listening, subscribe on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at the Denton Day. This entire offseason has been really built around this Terry McLaurin contract, it feels like, at least recently in the offseason. Terry wasn't at OTAs, he wasn't at minicamp. We know that he wants a new deal. They're working to get a new deal. And it's felt like this entire offseason, the question has been, is it going to be $31 million per year? Is it going to be $32 million per year? Maybe they get all the way up to $33 million per year, but that's kind of where the conversation stopped, at least until Tuesday. And we get this rumor that came from an interview that Lake Lewis did with the Virginia Talk Radio Network down in Lynchburg, Virginia. I like the Virginia Talk Radio Network in Lynchburg, Virginia, because I interned there like 8 years ago when I was in college. But Lake Lewis said $36 to $37 million. And let me tell you, that comes very out of left field. But it's also impossible to deny when you see a number come across the dashboard that says $36 to $37 million. You're like, huh? $36 to $37 million. I don't know where Lake was getting that information. I don't know if that was a source, gut feel. That I am unaware of. But what I do know is that Terry McLaurin is not going to get $36 to $37 million. That is just not going to happen on a per year basis. Terry McLaurin is a great wide receiver, but you have to be an elite wide receiver to be getting $36 to $37 million. Why do I say that? Because literally one person gets that money. It's Jamar Chase. Justin Jefferson does not get that money. CeeDee Lamb does not get that money. A.J. Brown does not get that money. So the idea that Terry McLaurin is going to get that money after one really, really good year, all-pro year, with Jaden Daniels is a little steep for my liking. Is Terry going to get paid? Yes. Is he going to get paid here? Also, yes. These silly little rumors about Pittsburgh and Los Angeles, take those out, throw them out the window. Drown him in the Potomac River. Like, those are not real. Terry McLaurin is going to be playing for Washington in 2025 and beyond. But he's not going to be getting $36 to $37 million. So let me fill you in a little bit on how this works. You're going to have the team and the agency, the representation for Terry McLaurin, get together. The representation for the team is going to say, we believe that Terry McLaurin is worth X amount of money. The representation for Terry McLaurin is going to say, cool, we think he is worth Y amount of money. And then what those two sides do is they come together on a price with guarantees, and there's a lot of intricacies in contracts as well, but they come together, common ground, sign the contract. If anyone was going to offer him $36 million, that thing is signed immediately. There is no world where they're going to slide $36 million across the table, and unless they're just royally screwing him and not guaranteeing any of the money, there is no world in which they sign a reputable contract. They say it's $36 million, slide it across the table, and the representation for Terry McLaurin doesn't sign that thing immediately. They're not going to be like, $36 million, but we wanted a little bit more. We're going to squeeze just a little bit more. That's not how this works. If $36 million came across the table, or God forbid, $37 million across the table, that thing is signed. What is happening in these conversations is that they are trying to decipher where Terry McLaurin stands. You value age in there as well. I don't believe that 30 years old is like this massive old man the way that some people do on social media. I'm a firm believer that a wide receiver, if you are legitimately elite, can still have, or legitimately good for that reason, can still have good seasons past the age of 30. They don't fall off a cliff the way that running backs fall off the cliff, especially if you have a real bag when it comes to route running, because that's really all that it is. I believe Terry can have some very successful years in age 30, 31, 32, and 33. So I'm not worried about him being 30 years old. But what they're having in these conversations is, all right, where does Terry McLaurin stand? And I would say after 2024, with an all-pro season under his belt, Terry McLaurin's a top 10 wide receiver. I feel pretty confident in saying that. You might even be able to argue he's an 8 or 7. 7 is the highest I would go, and it might be a little bit of a stretch. But you could say that Terry McLaurin falls in that route, in that realm, pretty comfortably. You're not going to be arguing that he's better than A.J. Brown. You're not going to be arguing that he's better than CeeDee Lamb. Certainly not Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. Those feel pretty concretely as the top 4 wide receivers in the NFL. And if you are going to argue that, please do. come to the comment section. I got something for you. Like, what I would like to hear that argument, because there's nothing statistically that is going to say that Terry is on the same level as those guys. He's on the same level as your guys like DK Metcalf, maybe even an Amon-Ra St. Brown. At this point in his career, I would say that Terry McLaurin might be on the same level as a Tyreek Hill. He doesn't have the speed of Tyreek Hill, but he does pretty much everything else really, really well, maybe even better than what Tyreek Hill does. So he's in that conversation, but he's not in that top four conversation, certainly not that top three conversation. And when you're asking for $36, $37 million, you better definitively be in that top three conversation. It does feel like for a certain point of years, everyone just felt like the next guy that is going to get paid is going to reset the market. No matter who he is, no matter what he's done over the course of his career, they're just going to reset the market. But what has happened recently is that the market has been reset to such a high degree. I mean, Jamar Chase is getting paid about $5 million per year more than Justin Jefferson, despite those two very much being the top two wide receivers in the NFL. Is somebody going to get paid more than Justin Jefferson soon? Certainly. I don't think that guy's going to be Terry McLaurin, though, because what does he do that's on the level or better than Justin Jefferson? And those are the conversations you're having. And I tweeted this out and I said, what does Terry McLaurin do at a top five or top two level for that regard at the wide receiver position? And somebody got back to me and said, well, Denton, look at his contested catches. And the contested catches are certainly something. But that's not what's going to elevate a contract from potentially $32 million to $36 million. Now, Terry has intangibles because if you think about the history of this organization, particularly recently, he is something that really means something to us. And that does count for something, at least as far as I'm concerned. You should want to keep Terry McLaurin for what he provides as a human being in the community and what he provides leadership in the locker room. He's been a really good player on a really awful team for a really long time, and that team happened to be really good last year. He was a big part of it. But that's not going to raise the contract from $32 million to $36 million. Maybe that raises it from 32 to 33, but it's not jumping $4 million. And the unfortunate reality of what Terry is at this point in his career as a player is that he's never been a game wrecker. Like a legitimate game wrecker. Point to me a game where Terry McLaurin has had a buck 50 and three touchdowns. Because if you look at Justin Jefferson, he has that on his resume. If you look at CeeDee Lamb, he has that on his resume. We know that Jamar Chase has that on his resume. A.J. Brown did that to us a couple of times. So he has that on his resume. All of the top wide receivers, top five wide receivers, have games where they have legitimately wrecked it, just completely destroyed it. Now, there were games last year where it was just oh so close. The game against New Orleans is a really good example of that. We remember that because it came down to the wire. It shouldn't have. Jaden and Terry were just a little off on a couple of plays, and that should have been Terry's first three touchdown game. It was not. He doesn't have those game-wrecking examples on his resume, so that is not going to help him when he wants to get this $36 million thing. Now, again, he's going to get paid. He's probably going to get paid around $32 million, which is a really good number to get paid at. But this idea of $36, $37 million, you better be a top two wide receiver or at least really close, and Terry just isn't that. I'm curious, though, your thoughts. When does he get paid? Not what the number is, when does he get paid? Are we sitting here up past 4th of July still scratching our head and worried about whether or not Terry is going to get this contract? Let me know down below in the comments. You can tweet me at TheDentonDay. I appreciate you stepping into my office. Now, respectfully, get out.